Welcome to the Man Cave Podcast with Dan Casper.
What up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by our good friends from Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Brandon Berg sitting across from me right now. How you doing, man? Good. We're going to just kind of shoot the shit, okay, on this episode. No top five. We are working on a top five, though. We're going to do it's not necessarily top five. We do this once in a while. It's a draft. This was your idea. But baseball movies, drafting fictional baseball players. So we can't draft John Goodman's Babe Ruth.
Correct.
Because
that was
based
literally
off
the
of
example I was thinking of, too.
So we can't do that one. We can't draft Ken Griffey Jr. out of Little Big League.
Yes. Now, are we going to... Is there enough to do a full lineup? I'm not sure there is. Because then are you getting in the situation of like, well, where do they play in the...
Should we do... How about this? Because I think we could do... You're right. We could do a pitcher easily, right?
Yeah,
we can do a starting pitcher. Do we do a couple hitters then, maybe?
Yeah.
Or position players?
I mean, you could even do like two pitchers if you wanted to.
Should we do... two pitchers and three position players? Make it a top five?
Yeah.
Plus a manager.
Yeah.
Do it that way?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. That's good. And we'll have a week to think about this.
You're right, because, I mean, you know, we could draft Matthew McConaughey from Angels in the Outfield, but it's like...
I mean, are you going to be drafting... You're going to be drafting Carlos Liston for the third Major League movie, and nobody wants that.
Yeah.
All 5'8" of him.
So, yeah, we can't do Field of Dreams because those are... Even though they're ghosts, but they're based off of real players over there.
Right.
Except for Moonlight Graham. He's not real, but he's based off somebody. So that's very not even based on anybody. How about that? So could we do the Sandlot guys?
Yes.
Benny's a Jet? Even though he turns into being a Dodger at the end?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Okay. So we're just coming up with the rules on the fly here. Two pitchers, they could be a relief or a starter. What are you laughing at?
I'm already thinking about how I want to do this for next week.
You know what's going to happen? Rock, paper, scissors for draft picks.
No!
And then rock, paper, scissors for manager.
I think we should just put them all in one bucket, and you can draft them whenever. If you want to draft a manager first overall, you can do it.
Okay. All right, if you want to do it that way.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, we still need to do rock, paper, scissors, though, who goes first.
Correct. Yep.
We got to do that.
And it's non-snake style, so it'd be 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Yep.
So that way the rock, paper, scissors, like you get something.
Yeah.
Like you earn the right.
Right. So.
And by that I mean you earn the right because you always beat me at rock, paper, scissors. So.
All right. So I keep wanting to say starting pitcher. Two pitchers.
Just two pitchers.
And I'm just going to say three position players. It could be because of their bat, defense, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Right. So okay. Leave it pretty generic that way.
We're gonna leave it up to a vote too.
Yeah.
Might as well.
Yep. Might as well. So I think we'd both want the same manager, so that'd be interesting to see if we use that as the first pick. I mean, I don't know if I kind of trust Billy Haywood as my manager right now.
I might.
Now, okay, I'll throw out a movie for Love of the Game. That's not real players, right? So like Billy Chappell could be a player drafted out of this, right?
Yeah.
Billy Chappell? All right. You know who Billy Chappell is, right? For everybody who's listening, he's nodding yes instead of actually voicing.
This is good listening.
Yeah. So, okay. Just want to clear it out. So, but, all right. See, I was talking a little bit off the air about these baseball movies because Hudson's watching a lot of them right now, a lot of the kid ones. An observation I had, kind of the underrated role is like the announcer in these games, like in a lot of these movies.
Do we draft an announcer too?
Everybody's going to want Harry Doyle.
Oh. When do you if you got him, how early do you? If you win the rock paper scissors, how early are you drafting him?
Well, here's the thing: anybody who drafts Harry Doyle is just going to automatically win if we put it to a fan vote. That's going to be the case. You know that.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they will.
I don't think we can do that.
Okay.
So, but I mean, Angels in the Outfield, Little Big League, Rookie of the Year with John Candy. I mean, for crying out loud, obviously Harry Doyle, Major League, but for Love of the Game, you had Vin Scully in that movie doing the announcing. Only one is like Sandlot. Although he had a narrator throughout the whole thing. So, and then he ends up being what? A broadcaster. Play-by-play guy on the radio. I just think it's a cool parallel because when you think about baseball, that's one of those things that kind of goes hand in hand is the play-by-play guy. Mm-hmm. Radio or TV or whatever over there. So, what was your favorite kids-related baseball movie? Is it Rookie of the Year?
I think it is.
Is it Rookie of the Year?
I think it is.
Okay.
And again, everyone that listens to this knows my favorite movie is Major League, but that is very much not a kids' baseball movie. So, no, I think it would probably be Rookie of the Year. I know I watched it a lot when I was a kid.
I watched it all the time at my grandma's because it was recorded on VHS. That's up there. Mine's Sandlot. That's just my go-to one. That was another one I always watched as a kid at my grandma's, recorded on VHS. It's just that's probably my favorite baseball movie, to be honest with you, is Sandlot. That's one of my favorite movies of all time there too. So I'd probably have to go that route. Now, baseball is overall Major League your favorite one.
It's my favorite. It's my favorite movie, bar none.
See, that one's tough for me now. I don't know if it's. I think it's still Sandlot. I throw Field of Dreams in there. Major League is easily the most quotable movie of all time, in my opinion. Some quotes we can't say. I mean, we could say on a podcast. We don't need to.
No, but if you've seen the movie, you know.
Now, I don't know off the top of my head. Was that one of those movies that was received well initially? Do you know?
I don't know, because it came out, like 89-ish?
I think so.
I was like 4.
Yeah. So is it one of those that, I think it's one of those that's just grown more in
better
popularity?
Like, I think it did well, like at the box office. But
isn't it weird to think about, like, okay, that time frame, whether it's 89 through the mid-90s, of how many, like, baseball movies came out when you throw in Major League, Field of Dreams, Bull Durham, Rookie of the Year, Sandlot, all these different baseball movies that came out during that time frame. Like, what was it about that 5, 6, 7, 8 year span where it was just baseball?
By the way, Major League, it had an $11 million budget and box office $75 million.
Well, that ain't bad. No, that ain't bad. That's a cool profit right there. $60-some million profit.
The other two, not as much.
All right. So, but when you think about it, there was like that run of like, and they're classics, and they held up the time too, right?
Right. Yeah, it's one that you like. It does. You can sit down and watch it. Like for me, with sports movies and like sports TV shows or whatever, something that's always been important to me when it comes to that is the quality of like the action. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, Charlie Sheen has said like he took some stuff to help.
He looks like a pitcher when he's out there. He
looks like it. Like, and he was actually throwing like upper 80s or something, wasn't he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and he had some help with that. We'll just say he's admitted to it. Mm-hmm. But still, like, all of the action you see there looks legit.
Except for Jake Taylor's swing. That's a little bit.
But then, like...
But Pedro Serrano's swing looks like a Major League swing.
Yeah, like they look like they were baseball players.
Yeah, because
to me, that's important.
That's what bugs me about football movies. With the quarterbacks.
Yes, and and I've never seen the movie, but the thing I can't get past, like the Kurt Warner movie, like when you see the picture of him, he looks like he's 350 pounds. Like Kurt Warner wasn't, like he was big, but he wasn't like gigantic.
Yep.
Wasn't like he was Dante Culpepper.
Right.
But like I just see that's kind of like the the still of that. I'm just like, I don't know, like, and the thing I brought this up with too was as much as I like the TV show Eastbound and Down, HBO, like the baseball action of it was not very good. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But obviously that was only a small part of it.
There is a movie that a lot of people love, and I love it. Or I shouldn't say I like it. I have it on DVD. The Program. Joe Kane does not have a very good throwing motion for somebody who's up for the Heisman Trophy. See, it's stuff like that bothers me when I see stuff like that.
Yeah, and you know what? For you and me, maybe it's nitpicking, but hey, that's
Shane
how we
Falco looks like he knows how to throw a football.
Yes, he does.
From the Replacements.
Yes, he does.
James Vanderbeek knows like he throws a football in Varsity Blues. Paul, the guy who passed away, Fast and the Furious. Paul Walker. Paul Walker looks like he knows how to throw a football.
Twitter looks like
Blues.
he knows how to run a route.
Exactly. You know what? It's stuff like that. Okay, yeah, we may be nitpicking, but for crying out loud, if I'm watching a sports movie,
it makes a difference.
It looks like that person actually is playing sports.
It allows you to get a little bit more immersed. Like when you believe like what you're watching. This is the suspension of disbelief. Anytime you're watching a movie, like when you really get into a movie, it doesn't matter what the movie's about. Like
right. Sunshine from Remember the Titans looked like he could chuck a pigskin.
If you're watching a sci-fi movie and it's got like really bad special effects stuff, you're going to be like, oh.
Mm-hmm. It'd be the same if I'm watching a basketball movie and I could tell that person doesn't know how to shoot a jump shot.
If they're like, if they just got a really wonky shot or.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or they don't know how to properly do a layup. That sort of. I'll notice that.
Yep.
And there's other movies we can nitpick, but that's the one I always go to. Is the program is like, okay. We couldn't find a guy who could work on his throwing motion.
I think that, and another example of that where I think the action really fit was Days of Thunder.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of work with NASCAR. Mm-hmm. And, it's legit.
Mm-hmm. That's like the first Rocky movie's awful when you really pay attention to their fighting scenes. Because you could tell they clearly obviously, you're not going to hit each other. Once in a while in rehearsals they did, on accident. But you could tell in that first movie where... Okay, the punches were a little bit off. But then you watch, like, Rocky 2, and they got a lot better on that. And maybe it's just the time. 70s, you're talking about trying to make a boxing movie. And obviously you don't want to hurt anybody or such. But, yeah, it got better. But
sometimes you just got to lay it in.
Yeah, it's just... And I know I'm in the minority on that because people, love the movie, the program. But it's just that I can't watch that without thinking... That quarterback's supposed to win a Heisman. I guess if Tim Tebow could, then maybe that was the early version of Tim Tebow, playing wise, not obviously character wise between the two over there too. So, I'm trying to think of any other ones off there too. I think we've drafted. Have we drafted football quarterbacks before?
I think we did.
I think we did.
I think I really wish we would have just kept a list or. Something so that we
I know we did something with the quarterbacks.
We did.
Because I think I had Vanderbeek number 1 or 2. I think I had him up there. Yeah. Trying to think. It just seems like when it comes to sport, it's either it's either baseball or boxing when it comes to the majority of sports movies out there. So, all right. Okay, so... Yeah, I was gonna do some rankings for that, but I think that might tip our hands on how we're gonna draft for next
right.
week.
No, I would agree. Yeah, because even just thinking now, I thought of some that I would that I need to make sure I jot down stuff.
Okay, so since we're talking baseball, we got to mention Willie Mays passing away. Obviously, everybody by now who's probably listened to a sports podcast probably knows that. But Willie Mays, you go through a list. Everybody's got lists about greatest baseball players out there. ESPN's top 100 from a couple years ago had him at number 2 behind Babe Ruth, which it seems like, I don't know, depending on who you ask, you're probably going to get a lot of different answers. Babe Ruth's a very popular answer for the best, but Willie Mays is also a very popular answer for one of the best, or Ty Cobb or whoever.
Right.
But is it fair to say that Willie Mays was perhaps the most complete baseball player of all time?
I think so. And then you'll probably have some people and rightfully bring up the fact, well, Babe Ruth pitched and he hit. Mm-hmm. But, Willie Mays, I don't know if he was ever asked to pitch, probably could have. Mm-hmm. But, he was, he hit, he defended, it's just... I think it's just
the iconic image of him is the over-the-shoulder catch in center field.
Right. I think it's just how you look at it.
Yeah. That 5-tool definition, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And obviously he played before we, were around, so we never got to see him.
Right. It's always different when you can experience the greatness firsthand versus just kind of going back and seeing the numbers and the highlights.
Mm-hmm. But, when you hear everybody talk about it and then you see some of the clips that were out there, it's just... he's definitely one that, if I could hop in a DeLorean, I'd like to go back and watch, play a game or something like that. So, but, do you think, based off the best that we could come up with and know that, was Ken Griffey the closest one to Willie Mays, you think, in terms of maybe that 5-tool type of talent?
I think so. Another one, I would say it would be Mike Trout.
I want to ask you something about Mike Trout. Because in that list that I mentioned, that ESPN list from a couple years ago where they did top 100, he was number 15 already. Do you think he's fallen a little bit? And it's because of injuries, maybe?
Think so. I think it's so tough to stay on that pedestal for so long. Mm-hmm. People are always going to try to find a way to maybe move you down a little bit, even if you've done, it's not your doing. But I think the injuries probably have the injuries and playing on a team that hasn't been good.
Right.
That won't help his case. But when he's healthy, even now, he's still fantastic. Mm-hmm. He just unfortunately can't get a full year.
The thing, and you can tell me if I'm way off on this. The one thing that I think is different about Trout. Because I feel like when we were younger, and to an extent there's certain players like this to this day, but when there was that really good player that was on a poor team, it always felt like, oh, he's going to get traded. Regardless of the contract, he's Alex Rodriguez when he signed a huge deal with Texas. It was like, oh, he's going to get traded. Boston, New York, ended up going to New York. Ken Griffey, even signed up with Cincinnati, or whatever. It felt like if there's that really good player on a bad team, they were going to get moved. I don't feel like you hear that with Trout.
No, and I think the contract is. I mean, when you factor in both the contract and the injury history, some teams are going to have some pause. Mm-hmm. But I mean,
because even Ohtani last year we were talking about he's going to get traded.
But and Trout isn't. It doesn't seem like he's the type of person that would cause a stink about that and say, "Well, I don't want to be here anymore." Mm-hmm. He wants to win with the Angels. Mm-hmm.
Even though he's a Philly guy, he's an East Coast guy.
Maybe that's a bit to his detriment over to ultimately what his legacy will be. But you can't really fault him for that.
Mm-hmm. Because doesn't it feel like back in maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago, it just felt like there was that narrative if there was a really good player on a bad team that they were going to get traded somewhere.
Maybe part of that, too, is because we're Brewers fans, and there was a period of time where that happened.
Yeah, that's true.
Whether you were Burnett, Cirillo,
Carlos Lee,
Richie Sexson, whoever. There was that stigma of... And it's funny because I still... Every once in a while, you'll kind of hear it from a Brewer fan, too. Or at least I have, where... Because obviously the Brewers are limited in what they will spend. There's kind of the idea, and then obviously the Josh Hader trade I think kind of maybe stoked those flames or whatever. But it's been a little bit they did spend big money to keep Ryan Braun. They spent big money to keep Christian Yelich. They have to be a little bit pickier with it. They're not going to keep everybody, and Corbin Burns obviously this past winter as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's definitely out there.
Right. Yeah, because we were talking about I'm glad you mentioned Trout and that. I'm like, if they redid that rankings, would he be top 20? Does Ohtani go into top 20?
I don't know. I mean, we're always such prisoners of the moment for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who would be would Willie Mays be number 1 or number 2 or number 3 for you?
I think I would put him 1 above Babe Ruth.
Above Babe Ruth?
I think I would.
Because of the 5 tool?
I think so.
Okay. It's interesting to read, I was reading some quotes from Joe Torre that said that if Mickey would have played in a better hitter's park, not, Polo Grounds and then Candlestick, he believes that he would have broken Babe Ruth's home run record before Hank Aaron. And I mean,
Willie.
Or yeah,
you said Mickey.
Did I say Mickey? I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Willie Mays.
Yeah, you're right. And that's something to consider.
Right.
He had 660.
But you put him in a ballpark that Polo Grounds? I think they said dead center was 450.
Something. Yeah.
Something like that, and it's like, holy crap. First of all, that catch makes it even better to cover that ground. But I get it. You got to play where you got to play, sort of thing.
At that time, I mean, there wasn't player movement; just wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. You were on a team, and that was your team.
Right. But and that's where, for people like us, we have to go back on those quotes and those stories and those comments from people who actually saw them play and or played with them in that. But I think that kind of tells you something. Okay, the guy still hit 660, but you got people who are baseball, experts saying he would have hit more if he was in a different ballpark.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like at times though, when it comes to baseball, we're so ingrained that it has to be Babe Ruth as number 1.
Right. Because he's Babe Ruth.
Plays for the Yankees.
The Sultan of SWAT.
Right.
The Sultan of SWAT.
There's a Sandlot movie. We were just talking about it. The Great Bambino. All the
Babe Ruthy.
Yeah. It's almost like ever since I was a kid, it was like it just ingrained that Babe Ruth is the best player of all time.
Babe Ruth is baseball.
Right. do you feel like that? Do you think that's changing? Do you think that's still the case a little bit?
But I mean, this is also just like if someone said, "Well, I think Babe Ruth is best." Okay, fine. Like I can't argue it. It's just like I'm not gonna, I would probably lean towards Mays, but I can't argue that. It's up for debate.
So then it kind of goes into something else that we were talking about, where to me it's unique when it comes to baseball players because you have the offensive side, then you have the defensive side, whereas other sports, okay, if you're a wide receiver in football, you're focused on running routes and catching the football, right? I mean, you're not focused on covering another guy or blitzing after a quarterback.
Or even blocking.
Quarterbacks, your main thing is throwing the football. Not to dumb it down, there's a lot going on, but you're not, again, going on the defensive side
if
or
you're
anything like
lineman,
that.
You're blocking. You're not catching. If you're a defense, if you're an edge rusher, you're pass rushing. You're dropping a little bit, but like you're very specialized in what you do. And what makes football is you have a bunch of people doing specialized roles, doing it together.
And that's where I almost feel like in football, it's hard at times to say who are the best players because it'd be like there's so many different roles. Basketball is maybe a little bit easier, although you got guys who are 7 foot that dominated compared to
now it's a little bit more positionless.
Right. But then you got baseball where it's like, okay, pitchers, then you got the hitters, but then like, okay, the Babe Ruth and the Willie Mays one. So Ohtani last couple of years, was getting compared to Babe Ruth because he was a pitcher and he's a great hitter. We threw out a Willie Mays and Ken Griffey one, where that one to me is like, I don't know how to get like. Is it easier to figure out who's like? Because we always get in a debate who's the best of all time, especially now in basketball. Is it Jordan or LeBron? Hockey, I think majority is probably still going to go with Gretzky. You got Gordie Howe on that list probably too. Baseball, is it fair to say like maybe pitchers are kind of compared to the defensive players in football where maybe they don't get graded as high because they're not on the offensive side? Does that make sense? Do you know where I'm getting at with that?
No, I can see that.
So, what are you looking at over there?
I was looking at Babe Ruth's numbers. And mostly I just wanted to kind of look at his defensive numbers.
Do they have that?
Well, by defensive numbers, I just meant like games played at spots.
Oh, okay.
And I look at it now, and now that I know the context for when you brought it up a while back, Babe Ruth won the MVP in 1923, never again. Of course.
They were only allowed to win it once.
Yes. And later on, and obviously the All-Star game didn't start until like the 30s because he's a 2-time All-Star.
Mm-hmm.
That's
where I think when we talk about that stuff for others, you got to look at the bigger picture. Because I think some people may look at that like, dude only won one MVP, sort of thing. That shouldn't tell the whole story though. But I feel like a lot of people use that as resume builders.
Yeah. I mean, and an interesting thing too with Willie Mays was he actually missed a year, one of his early years. I mean, one of his, in theory, his primer years, military service.
That's the other thing with Ted Williams did the same thing.
Yeah.
Joe DiMaggio, those guys. That's where I go. And I don't know, Brandon, like, I'm a big, I'm big sports history one, but I'm coming around, like, with those era baseball players, like, to me, is just, like, put that in perspective. Because that's not happening today, right?
Oh, gosh, no.
That's not happening today where you've got these all-time greats leaving to go, for military service. Then they come back. Like Ted Williams, I mentioned. You mentioned, Mays. These players, like, to kind of think about that actually happened and it wasn't that long ago.
Right.
To me, is still kind of mind-boggling at that. And that, to me, almost should add more to their legacy. Because they were able to leave that, come back, but then, for the most part, kind of pick up where they left off from their skill set.
Not easy.
I know. And it's just, that's still kind of mind-boggling to me over there. And I know when, football players like early 60s and that, there were some that did that, but you hear that more with baseball, don't you? Or maybe some of the college football players, in World War II, when college football is bigger than the NFL, pro football at that point. So you'd go Willie Mays, okay.
I think so, and I looked up, too, comparatively, according to Baseball Reference WAR, Ruth is ahead.
Okay.
I think it was like 182 to 158 or something. So, I mean, that's a ridiculous number. But that's a significant amount.
Yeah.
But I think I would.
I think we need to do one of these podcasts once in a while. Some of the most random baseball players of all time that come to your list. And the reason I bring this up, because I was scrolling through TikTok like all the young people do right now.
Youngins.
The
young
youngins over there. And for whatever reason, I stumbled upon a bunch of these all-star clips where they were introducing the starting lineups for these all-star games. And one of them, I can't remember the year, but Greg Maddux was the starting pitcher for the National League. Craig Biggio was leading off, and then it was Tony Gwynn. I'm like, oh, geez, you got two table setters, you know, right there. And then it was like, Barry Bonds was a third hitter, and then it was Mike Piazza was cleaning up. Then it was Bagwell, Ken Caminetti. And I'm like, oh, man, this is solid. Then they get to the last hitter, and I forgot about this guy. Jeff Blauser.
Jeff Blauser, infielder.
I'm like, oh my God.
Cubs, like,
he's the Jeff Hornacek of Major League Baseball during that time. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot completely about Jeff Blauser.
It would be fun to go just back and look through, like, and for me, I think baseball would probably hit the best, but like the starting lineups just to see like those guys. Like, I think, you know, like one year, like I think it was 08. I think Ben Sheets was the starter for the All-Star game. I think it was at Yankee Stadium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was just like, oh my God. Like, I could just picture some of the cards I had of Blauser, but I'm like, he looks like Jeff Hornacek. It's like, you know, just some random guys like that.
Doing
the face touch before the free throw?
Before the free throw? Like,
but I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about Jeff Blauser. So I had to look up his numbers. A couple of years, he was an All-Star, but he also hit over 300. So,
yeah. I
mean, was he like a better version of Craig Counsell? A little bit over there? So, I was
maybe we never knew how much better of...
I was thinking, oh, that would be like our top 5 most random baseball players we could think of, or something like that. I don't know how we would be able to do that.
You want to find a way to incorporate that, but like how?
Yeah, it was just like, oh my God, or maybe like it's the most random All-Stars or something to that effect. But I'm like, Jeff Blauser.
Now, is it just baseball? Because otherwise, I would have to go with newly married Neil Abear's Jeff Saturday with the Packers.
No, I mean, I think we could do like NBA '90s because there's so many. They're on the Utah Jazz. Let's just be real.
I don't think Greg Ostertag made an All-Star game, but I feel like you would have to specialize because otherwise that is such a wide open envelope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how we would specialize that though.
Yeah, well, we'll workshop it over the next few weeks.
It'd almost have to be like if we did the NBA, the top 5 NBA '90s centers who didn't make an All-Star game. Because I mean, that takes out Shaq, that takes out Akeem, that takes out David Robinson, Ewing, and all that. So it throws in Ostertag. I just looked up; he did not make it. Luke Longley. I mean, you got to throw him in there, right? Luke Longley did not.
Popeye Jones make an All-Star game.
Popeye Jones. Let me look it up. Popeye Jones. I feel like he played for 30 years. Popeye Jones did not make an All-Star team.
He had a couple good rebounding years.
Yeah, he averaged 7.4 rebounds per game in his career. That's not bad.
No,
that's not bad at all.
Good career.
Yeah.
I know he made it, but because he was an 8-time All-Star. But I mean, another center that would disqualify would be Dikembe Mutombo.
Mm-hmm.
A personal favorite.
Of course, when you have a jersey of somebody that is your personal favorite. So, all right, I think that's enough shooting the you-know-what for this episode. So, all right. Appreciate you tuning in to the Man Cave Podcast, brought to you by Hy-Vee and Toyson Ford. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the podcast. And if you got a few seconds, if you haven't done so already, if you could give it a 5-star rating and a positive review so others can find the podcast, because that's how internet algorithms work, apparently. Also, don't forget to check out Swag Cave. That link is in the podcast description. Till next time, we'll talk to you on the next episode of the Man Cave Podcast.